right. Well, I would like to welcome you, Nathan, for being on here with us. We really appreciate you stepping in. We saw you in person back in October of 21, where we all got to hang out and do, I guess, what you would call not normal company things. um, um, but that was a really fun time that we all got to spend together. And that was the first time that I got to meet you and kind of learn about B Corp. So to get started, I would like to hear about your journey with B Corp and your career journey and how you got there.
Yeah, no, and just to go back, yeah, not normal company things, but like that to me is like inspiring. What I love about the B Corp community, because there is an element of you go through your career and I guess this will segue into my answer, but you go through your career and you pick up things that you like and that you don't like, and as I've gotten older and more seasoned and I just took the leap into full-time, entrepreneurship. It's fun because you're always like, well, if you don't like the way we do it, like if you don't like the way we do it, like go start your own thing. You're like, fine, I will. So, but like, seeing Brandon be authentically Brandon and Hilton Head was like inspiring to me to like, you can be you and run a company, and you just find the right type of person who appreciates the authentic you and sees your vision and wants to follow you and wants to be a part of that. So yeah, so I got into the B Corp movement. What was that now? 6 years ago, when I was doing my MBA at UGA, which I don't know if you're going to use video, but you can see my UGA wall behind me right now. For those not seeing my wall, there's a giant wall of UGA memorabilia. But yeah, I did my undergrad here, and then I was doing my MBA here. I don't want to say I was broken on capitalism when I got to UGA, but like 2013 I got laid off twice. End of 2013 I went back to work for Enterprise just because I was kind of getting very desperate, and I have nothing bad to say about it. I did 5 years for Enterprise when I lived out west, and I learned more from that company. Like I don't even know how many billions a year they're doing in revenue now, but you don't grow that successfully without being really good at KPIs and business and managing the numbers and all that. But at this point, I was like selling the used cars, which is the one that I was like, ugh. And there were just things sometimes where you're like, I didn't really get down with like, 2-year-old car, and you get some person who really needs a car, but the credit isn't that good and they can't put that much money down, and you can get them approved, but you're like, this is a terrible financial decision. But your job is to go like sell them on making a bad financial decision. And when in reality, they should save money, ride the bus for another year, save some more money, work on their credit, and come back and see me in a year. Anyway, so I did that. And then I worked for another horrible, horrible, horrible company. I shouldn't say another because Enterprise isn't one. But I worked for a horrible company after that with terrible bosses who told me that they weren't paying me for my ideas. They were paying me to execute their ideas. And I quit the next day. And then I was just kind of like, I don't know, figuring it out. So like when I went back in the MBA, I was driving an Uber and I was working part-time at the convention center in Athens, and realizing that like, oh, like this is what the working class is. It's $8 an hour, no benefits, part-time, 3 part-time jobs. And I was reading Capital in the 21st Century by Thomas Piketty. Just all about the wage, the gap, the growth and the gap between, the basically the rate of growth of capital, those who have money, and how much the capital grows, and the rate of just the overall economic growth, and like this disparaging like wage gap and wealth gap that was growing, and basically historically what happens when that happens. And so of course, where do you go? I go get an MBA. Go right back into the business school. When you're burned out on capitalism, get an MBA. And so yeah, and all of a sudden January of 16 I sat down for a project with which is still weird to call him my former boss, because I ended up working for Jeff and Ad Victoriam until a couple weeks ago. So I went to work for them after the MBA, but I always joke that like I started working for them on that project to certify them as a B Corp, and I was like, this is the capitalism that I've been missing. It's, stakeholder capitalism. It's not just shareholder, like make money over all else. Like, yeah, but you have to make money. I fully got that. I'm an MBA. Like, I know how to, like, it's important because I have to give you a raise and you want a bonus and I have to pay for your benefits and you want to make a competitive salary and you need time off that I need to pay for. And like, so I get the whole, like, we do need to make money, but like, how can we make money and care about our people and care about our community and invest in our people and invest in our community and care about the planet, and all these things aligning in a for-profit business was like mind-blowing to me. So I was hooked. Like, that was it. Like, and then what was it, 2018, I started working for them before I even graduated in 2017 full time, and it's like, oh, and it's funny because I talked about enterprise and all the stuff I learned. I started as director of operations, and and so it was everything that I learned managing an enterprise branch, all the KPIs, all the management. I translated so much stuff into IT consulting of like, these are our KPIs, this is where we're going to hit, these are the important numbers, and revenue will follow and profitability will follow. And so I took all that and I ran operations and was kind of doing B Corp stuff in my spare time. And then in my other spare time, which I'll call hours 71 through 80, I started Be Local Georgia. And then that kind of started me on this trajectory where, like, just being the B Corp guy, Jeff Hillmeyer had me on his podcast, called me Mr. B Corp Georgia. Like, it just kind of grew into my identity. And we were chatting offline before this about LinkedIn, and like, I post a lot about B Corps, and so then I became like this de facto expert in the state. And then all of a sudden UGA is asking me to teach the B Corp class at the University of Georgia, which we'd kind of informally done projects, but we didn't have a class, and so they asked me to do that. And then early 2021, somebody asked me to like help them, like, can I pay you to help me with the B Corp stuff? And I was like, yeah. And then you find yourself, on a search engine typing in like how to file an LLC and what's an employee identification number. And so it just kind of took off from there. And then it was funny, I was working with that first client, and that's when Scott Sadler, who ended up helping with the 401k for EcoLink,
Yeah,
then reached out to me and said, I've got somebody you need to talk to, really interested in B Corp. So that brings it all full circle.
it does, because it moves on to the next question of how do you, like, what is the process of becoming a B Corp?
Yeah, and I mean, I guess we should probably even back up for some of the listeners who probably are like, still like, what the hell's a B Corp? I can slam dunk it now in one simple sentence, which is, B Corps are to businesses as LEED is to a building. But you're certifying every aspect of the goodness of your business. So how, transparent are you? What's the corporate governance look like? Workers, benefits, pay multiplier from top to bottom, time off, parental leave, things like that. Community impact. So how, what are you doing in the community as far as, pro bono work, volunteer time, monetary contributions, those types of things. DEI is in the community section. And then there's the environmental section, which is just a lot of, what is our, like, are we measuring like our footprint? Do we even know what we're putting out in the world? Like, are we thinking about that as a KPI? So we start to look at travel. We start to look at, even if we have to travel, where are we staying? How are we getting there? Or what kind of rental cars are we approving? It's funny. I used to go back and forth at AdVic where people would our PEO would always want us to they would change the handbook to must rent the cheapest rental car when traveling. And I'm like, no, that is not our policy. Our policy is the most fuel efficient vehicle. Sometimes it might be the cheapest, but no, like it's fuel efficient, not cheapest. But to corporate America, they're like, that doesn't make sense. It's the cheapest. And you're like, no, it isn't. But those little types of things of being intentional. And then the last section is customers. So how transparent are you, and things like that. So it's those 5 sections: governance, workers, community, environment, and customers, that kind of go into the assessment. And then you have to get a score of 80. So you have to answer a bunch of questions. It's very, I don't want to say complicated or tedious, because now I've done so many of them that it really isn't. It's just that every situation is unique. So every client I work with is unique in their line of business and their philosophies, their strategy, their structure. So, but yeah, you go through that assessment and you get to a score of 80, and then you go through what we're going through right now, which is after a lengthy wait, which I wish was shorter, just because there's so much demand to certify right now that the queue just kind of keeps growing and growing. And you get to the point where you get on an actual, you have to upload a bunch of documentation to verify everything you answered, and then you get on, a review call. I call them audits, and they basically go through your assessment and go like, what'd you answer that one for? Prove it, like those types
Yeah.
of things. And you kind of do this song and dance with B Lab, which is the nonprofit certifying organization. And then you either get a thumbs up or a hey, work on this. And it's a process that I always joke that you hate it when you're going through it, just because you're like, oh, come on. But on the other side, you love that there's a gate, that there's a serious, like, there's no greenwashing involved. Like, if you ever meet I will never claim that any B Corp is, oh, this is a perfect company. But what I will say is, they really wanted it. Like, this isn't something that you're just like, oh, we'll get that, it'll be sweet window dressing. Like, you have to work pretty hard to get B Corp certified, and that's kind of the differentiator between it and a lot of other, fill out a form and go like, we intend to do great in the world, and like, oh, cool, put this logo on your website. And it's like, at what point does that not become valuable?
Yeah. So then because of that, like you were talking about the lengthy process, is that, would you say, one of the main objections to some companies going through the process, or what other reasons have you seen that people don't want to become B Corp, or just for transparency purposes?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say the length is a big blocker. I try to be very upfront and let people know, so they, because you'll meet people that are like, I want to be done, what are we now, August? I want to be done by our end of the year meeting in November. And you're like, not going to happen. Like, I want them to make sure they, you don't want to like overpromise and you're like, oh, you're going to sit in this queue for a while. I think the biggest objections I usually get, or maybe I failed in my sales process, but I'll hear that I don't see the value in it. Kind
Yeah.
of we're already doing good, why do we need this? Which I can, because of exactly what I just said, is nowadays everybody has a CSR commitment. Kia has a commercial with an SUV driving down a beach, collecting, dragging a bin behind it, picking up trash, and then he sits on the beach and watches the turtles come in, and then it says Kia, like, and when
Yeah.
you're watching it, you're like, great ad, man. Kia really cares about the environment. You're like, wait a second, that's an SUV that gets like 17 miles to gallon driving down a
Yeah.
beach. What? So everybody has this, and it's like, how do you break through that clutter? It's kind of
Hmm.
my response to the ROI, or the why do we need this? I think it's a great differentiator, both for employee recruiting and retention, but also customer acquisition and customer lifetime value. And then the other big objection I'll hear, yeah, it's more so the some of the legal stuff, where companies kind of go like, I really don't want to have to do anything, because you legally, to meet the legal requirements of B Lab, you have to, if you're an LLC, you have to amend your articles of incorporation.
Yeah.
And if you're an S Corp or a C Corp, you have to um change to a public benefit corporation, which is taxed a lot like a C Corp. So for a C Corp, it's a much, I don't want to say easier lift. And you have to get a lawyer involved. You have to file some stuff with the Secretary of State, but it's a lot easier. S Corp is a little bit more complicated just from a
Hmm.
tax standpoint. But it's funny because EcoLink was an S Corp, and I'm like, I remember having that conversation with Brandon and being like, oh God, this is probably where the deal dies. And he was like, we haven't looked at our articles of incorporation in like 30 years. So get me in touch with your lawyer friend. And there's a B Corp attorney in Chattanooga.
Oh my
And so
gosh.
I just kind of went, here you go. And next thing I know, they're, you know, kind of refiling. And I was like, wow, I didn't think, I thought that would be a deal breaker, but Brandon was so set on this that he was like, nope, let's do it.
No, and so then that kind of like builds on, or I'm kind of backing up a little bit, but you're talking about how sometimes you get to the end and then they're like, no. So like, what are reasons for being denied, and can they remedy that? And do they have to go back through that whole process again, or can they just like skip to finish and resubmit like what they messed up of sorts?
Yeah, usually there's some wiggle room there. I think the technical answer from B Lab is, if you don't get it, you kind of have to start over in the process. But usually there's ways to, because you go through it, and usually what I'll do before we get to the audit is also, especially now that it takes as long as it does. When it took 2 or 3 months, it was like, okay, let's go back and add some policies. But usually you can say like, hey, I'm going to send you over a new policy we're drafting and putting in the handbook, like
Yeah.
for this question that we answered a certain way. Or, hey, you know what, we didn't buy carbon offsets, but we need another point or whatever for, so we're going to go ahead and go carbon neutral and things like that, like, so usually there's a way. I will try to brainstorm to find some extra potential points before the review call, just in case. So while we're on the call with the employee from B Lab, I can kind of say, hey, we have this other stuff identified, or hey, since we, especially in the last year, like one of my clients, we're getting ready, and I'm like, since they worked with a consultant, that I'm not just a box checker. I want to help them strategically change and make process improvements and make the business better. It's like, oh, in the last year, they ate all the dog food I gave them. And, here are all these things that they have now changed and all these policies that they've now implemented. And so questions that we answered, like not applicable or no, we don't do this. Now it's like, oh no, we do have all of that.
Yeah.
So usually we go in ready with some extra points just in case.
Here's some brownie points, extra brownie points.
Yeah, just in case all of a sudden they're like, now you're at a 79.8. Okay, but wait, let's go review these four. So,
So after a company becomes approved, what would you say is the biggest change a company sees after becoming B Corp certified?
all depends on the level of effort. I think there's been, I think people, I don't want to say people because I don't know who these people would be. Consultants, I don't know. There's been a lot of growth in the consulting space, and so I think there's some people out there that can help you check the boxes really well, but I don't think there's people. There's fewer that are thinking more along the lines of like, actual, like, how do we improve the business, and then on the back end, what's almost like phase two of this engagement, like what does the ROI piece look like? Because I know when we first certified, I said I did it again. It's weird, I never worked anywhere that long. When AdVic first certified, one of the things we looked around after the fact and we're like, okay, like high fives, it was like the CEO, the CFO, and me that knew we were doing this. So
Yeah.
like you get there and you're like, what do we do with it? Like, like, okay, let's put a logo on our door. Let's add a logo to our email signature. And after that, you're like, I don't really know. And so, and I luckily had a really good mentor who was like, just go get involved. You'll figure it out. And so I started going to conferences, and I went by accident. I went to Amsterdam. I went to the B Summit, thinking it was a global summit. It was European. I had a blast. I met a lot of cool German companies, brushed up on my German a little bit, had fun in Amsterdam. But did realize really quickly I'd met my tribe, some really inspiring people, and then started to figure out how to get involved. But yeah, I mean, it's very intentional. I think once you get it, it's not just like, hey, we're a B Corp, do business with us, but I think it creates a lot of cool marketing opportunities
Yeah.
if you can find a good way to bring it into your brand and how you talk about yourself. And you can do features on the different components. You can do a blog series about the improvements we made to the business as we went through this process, that can both let people know that, like, okay, we're a B Corp, and B, remind people what you do, bring it back to the brand, bring it back to the business, bring it back to what we're selling, our services, or in the case of employees, bring it in. Like, I mean, for EcoLink, you talk about the retirement plan and the things
Yeah.
like well above and beyond what most companies are doing for their employees, and probably better than any sort of retirement plan I've ever seen at even the big companies I work for, with the full 6% match and all
Yeah.
that, like, that most Fortune 500s aren't even doing. So bringing that in, and then you get to that point where, like, now it's like, when we want to do our internship program, people want to come and check this out, even highlighting, CEO and the why, and kind of getting them front and center. I think there's a really creative way to do the ROI. I would say it's hard to track because it's like, how do you attribute, like, okay, I mean, I guess you could do sales pre and post, but if you're doing something else, like maybe it was just a marketing campaign, maybe it was we did a sale, maybe we
Yeah.
did, it's hard to fully like say like, oh, you can see like a 6 to 10% ROI on the, like, I mean, you're doing it because it's the right thing to do, but I also think it creates a lot of ancillary ROI that is hard to track, but your gut goes like, okay, this is why. Like we used to joke at Advic that there, we don't get the sale, but we get the meeting because
Yeah.
people are just interested in like, what's this B Corp thing? So yeah, I
So
think that's it. But you have to be intentional. You can't just slap the logo on your website and expect people. I mean, there's 5,000 around the world now, but it still doesn't mean that everybody knows what it means. I mean, even we did a new hire survey right before I left, and everybody talked about B Corp being a reason they wanted to come work for us. And then I was doing their onboarding, and they were like, I'm like, who know? Like, what's okay? Who knows what a B Corp is? And like, nobody knew. And then we get the survey results back, and everybody was so excited about B Corp. But like, when I asked them, it was like, I think the best answer I got, which wasn't a very good one, was means we volunteer a lot. I'm like, kind of. That's one tiny component.
I
Um,
tried.
yeah, but it was fun. But they recognized the logo and the brand, and they understood it, and we did a good job of talking about it during the recruiting cycle without overselling it.
So, what advice would you give to companies who are hesitant to become B Corp?
I think honestly, I think you're missing a really good opportunity right now. Um, because I think it's still very much so in its infancy. I don't know how many companies there are around the world, but there's a lot more than 5,000. In the state of Georgia, we have 20. Gotta check the directory. I don't know. I'm waiting for one company to pay their dues so that they can be official. So let's just say 22 B Corps. But I think, when I'm teaching my class at UGA, and now Emory is teaching a B Corp class, and there were a bunch of people from Georgia Tech that were at our event last week in Avondale Estates, and like, this thing's kind of catching on everywhere. And like the students in the and I'm on the board of B Academics. So there's a whole nonprofit board around this curriculum in schools and the research that's happening. And like Gen Z is not going away, and Gen Z has their values and their priorities, and um they want something that gives them a little more purpose versus, I think millennials, we didn't find our voice until Gen Z showed up. And now we kind of have to be the voice of reason, where we're like, no, Gen Z, you can't burn it all down. But also, hey, let's like rebuild this better together. But I mean, you're seeing it with the great resignation or the whatever, after a while it gets overused and you're like, I hate that term.
Yeah.
But you're seeing it. And like, even like I heard somebody the other day when I was out in Boise refer to it as the great migration of people to better jobs, jobs with purpose, jobs that pay better, jobs with better benefits, and like all these things that kind of go back to being a B Corp. So I would also say too, like, even if you're just like hell bent on like, like I mean, or maybe it's an S Corp thing and it's not of interest to really change that, or it's a super complicated legal structure and it's just you can still take the assessment. It is free, and use that assessment as, I mean, there is a project that's going to be at Emory this year, and they use the assessment to create their KPIs. And it was like 2 or 3 years ago, and they're finally now kind of looking at like, okay, maybe it's finally time we certify. But that's how they monitor like what kind of a corporate citizen they are, is they use this assessment. And I think that's super cool. Like, even if you're not going to certify, the assessment's free. Go through and take, like, how do you know where you're at if you're not measuring a lot of these
Yeah.
things? Like, unless you can tell me that you've gone through, but even the little things like, the intentionality of like making sure that there's like a lactation break policy in your handbook. Like, I don't know. I mean, if you're hiring a young woman that maybe just graduated from college and thinking like, maybe in a couple years I want to start a family, and you look through the handbook and you're like, what kind of company is it? You know what I mean? Like, you're starting, like, it's those types of things that you don't normally think about. Like, yeah, of course we would let them take, they need to pump, go. But like, if you don't see that, you're kind of like, well, maybe I can't. And and especially you have to put yourself in the shoes of somebody earlier in their career of like, if it's not in the handbook, you assume that you probably can't do it. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? So it's
Hmm.
like, they're not going to go like, the company will probably let me do it. So like, just some of those little things of like different policies and handbooks and different, what are you sharing, what are you committing to sharing internally, and like, do you share revenue numbers? Do you help your employees understand how we make money, what our margins are, like those types of things of like helping them understand how the business runs, which, I mean, Gen Z and millennials alike, both, like, we'll do whatever you ask us to do. We just need to understand the why. And I think you go through this and you get into a lot more intentionality around that kind of stuff. So yeah, even if you're not going to do it, I would say take the take the assessment and see where you're at, and then talk to your marketing team about the value. Bring in some other, and I would also say talk externally with other B Corps around the value of doing this. That A, yeah, it's the right thing to do, but B, it's a really, really cool differentiator as a business. So yeah, do it. Try it. At least take a stab at it. See where you're at.
Yep. If you don't try, then you'll never know.
Yeah. And I mean, you won't improve. There were a lot of eye-opening moments. I mean, both times I went through it at Advic, and even working with clients now is the fun part of like, we got to one question. It wasn't worth a ton of points, but one of my first clients was like, hey, I think it was around like a DEI, a pay audit. And, those aren't cheap. And they were like, let's do it. I don't know. I don't know if I have blind spots. Like, I honestly don't know. So connect me with your person that can do those, and let's rock and roll. And so but you expect them to be like, it's not worth that many points and it's going to cost me some extra money, like, nah, we're not going to do it. And then you see like the light bulb go off, like, well, why am I doing this in the first place? Like, yeah, I want to do a DEI, yeah, I want to do a pay audit. I don't know, what if I have blinders? What if I am one of those people that thinks I'm super progressive and I run my business and a gender equality, and then I realize I pay my women less? Like, oh God. And you see almost like the panic, and like, yeah,
Yeah.
let's do it. So those are the types of things I think that go under the radar. And then you can figure out, if you've got a good marketing team, you can figure out how to talk about it in a way that spotlights some of the good work without necessarily being me, 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 me.
That's very fair. So to come like full circle, going back to the beginning, and we were kind of talking about our quote unquote unconventional team. How has your experience with the EcoLink team been with the B Corp certification process and working with a smaller group of people, a small but mighty team?
I think it's been really cool because, and getting to know Brandon, it's I mean, he is just very B Corp. Like, he is very, and everybody I've worked with in this community, but like, just seeing the things he's done with the business. And I know part of it was related to him purchasing it and figuring out like, what is it going to be, what's my legacy going to be, that he thinks very deeply on these things. But I mean, again, the retirement plan, I was sitting there in Hilton Head with y'all, and I did my little presentation, and then Scott Sadler, who Boardwalk Capital Management's B Corp, and he and Brand have known each other for a while, and Scott's walking y'all through and it's funny too, because EcoLink, some of the team is like fairly young or it's first job, and I'm like, y'all have no idea. I
This
think I
is
was talking,
this is my first like full-time out of college job. So
and I think I was telling Nate that I was just like, dude, you have no idea what that retirement, like a 6% match, regardless if you contribute anything. I'm like, well, it's not even a match. She's just putting money in a retirement account for you. Like, nobody does that. Like, nobody. So seeing some of the improvements he made and what he wanted this business to be, under his leadership, it was that's been the coolest part of seeing some of the improvements he's made, and the things that, like, yeah, let's do that. That I keep seeing as I work with clients, where I'm like, yeah, let's do that. Yeah, let's. And you go in kind of like almost like, in hockey they joke you put like foil under your gloves so you can punch harder, like
yeah,
under your tape. And it's like you go into some of these conversations like putting the foil on, like, all right, let me just be prepared for a little fisticuffs here, because I might have to battle to get this through. And all of a sudden it's like, yeah, we should do that. And you're like, oh, I guess I didn't need all the foil. I guess we're not fighting today. So I think that's been the cool part with Brandon, is just getting to know him as a person and his philosophies. And he's always there's an acknowledgement that he doesn't know everything, which is sometimes rare. The hubris to acknowledge that, like, there's books out there of people who know more than me, that have done more than me. And what else do I not know? And then even going to some of the networking events, I'll see him like taking notes during the panel, where like I think most people are just sitting there listening, and he's taking away nuggets of wisdom. So yeah. And then meeting the team was just cool, where you're just like, I don't know, it was just a very fun time. And I don't know, some of the flexibility. I mean, even Brandon's philosophies are like, wow, how do I get to a 4-day work week, and how do I let my people just work from anywhere? I just bought the book Let My People Go Surfing,
mhm.
by the founder of Patagonia. And I think Brandon might have recommended it to me. I know it's big in the B Corp space anyway, but but yeah, that's just one of those things where I'm kind of blown away sometimes with his um desire to make the company better and to put stakeholders first of how do I serve my customers better? How do I take better care of my people? Um,
It's surprising how much one day like off of your work week feels like it gives back to your life. Like it's really kind of creepy to have a 3-day work week or a 3-day weekend all the time. So it's just kind of like as a 23-year-old, it's a really good selling point because you're still at a point in your life where you want to go see your friends and visit people because they're all over the country before everybody starts getting married and having kids. And it's like Brandon's always been so encouraging of like, go visit people. He's like, you going to take a trip this year? And I'm like, maybe, probably. He's like, go take it, like enjoy your PTO. Like, he's very encouraging of the young people on his team to like go try new things and visit places. And it's something that I heard from friends that they don't get at their own workplaces. So I know it's eye opening to see like how good we have it here, honestly.
my first job, I got 1 week of vacation after 1 year of service. Like, oh, cool. I get to work an entire year. Wow, that is a terrible benefit. So yeah, no, I think you start to see those companies. I don't want to say you're gonna eventually have a brain drain. Like you have to figure out a way to run a profitable business that allows your people like and I hate to say like dinosaurs, but I think there's an element of people that like nobody cares that your job sucked in the 80s, that your first job was terrible, so their first job has to be terrible. It's like hazing in a fraternity. I never got it. Like, why? What was it? Why do they have to, just because you went through something terrible? What if it was so terrible? Why would you want somebody else to go through it? Like, like I used to have to fight sometimes if we had somebody used to always say, I remember my first part-time job, and it's like after a week where you worked 70 hours, you're like, that's the last, I just want a gold star and a thank you. You don't make a joke about how like 70 hours isn't a long week. I don't care. Oh, so you used to work until your knuckles bled. Nobody wants to. Like that's terrible. I'm sorry you had to go through that, but yeah, I think it's an interesting element. So of like encouraging the work-life balance. Work is a necessary thing that we have to do, but it doesn't need to define us and it doesn't need to make life miserable.
No, that is fair. And we enjoyed spending time with you and getting to know more about B-Corp and having all that time together. And we hope we get to do it again eventually. We're in Atlanta every once in a while, so we'll have to all meet up again and share wisdom, get more nuggets of wisdom around the table.
Well, now that I will say there is something cool about now that I'm full-time entrepreneur of like, I don't, when I want to take whatever I want to do, I can kind of do it as long as my work gets done, which I had a lot of flexibility to that, Vic. But like, yeah, whenever you guys come to Atlanta, let me know because I kind of make my own schedule. I have to clear it with the boss, but oh no, my boss says it's okay. So yeah, we can make that happen.
Yeah, very much so. Well, I appreciate you coming on here with us today and talking about B-Corp, and hopefully our application process keeps moving down the tube.
We're getting close. We're getting close. Now that Brandon's back from sabbatical, we're gonna get some time on the calendar and kind of make sure we've got all the ducks in the row. Because you also go like almost like 9 months or however long it's been since we submitted, and you're like, well, where are we? Where like I find the Google Drive, like all those things of like all the things that were so fresh in your mind as you're going through it every day, and then you kind of don't touch it for a really long time, and now it's like, okay, let's regroup and put some time on the calendar and actually sit down and kind of go back through this thing again. So when we get to the call, we're ready to go.
Well, we're very excited. I'm very excited. I'm a Gen Z, so I'm excited to have more purpose in my life for doing good for the earth because that's big for me in my generation. So,
Yeah, you get rid of those, down with those Kia commercials. Sorry, Kia, but do better.